Okay, right, John, I'll hand over to you now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you, Julie, and thank you to the committee for inviting me along. Thank you also to everyone who's along today. I am really pleased to be along. Extensive knowledge. I'll try and live up to that. No pressure there. Thanks, Julie. But I have some thoughts about well-being, mental health, in the workplace, at home, during the pandemic, etc., that I'd like to share with you. The idea of this session is that we'll take about 40 minutes, something like that, because we're going to be rounding it off by about 10 to, so we've got time for questions if there are any questions. And it's going to be quite interactive. If you feel free to interact. So for those of you who are able to share your screens, then do give a wave and say hello, because, yes, we're all meeting together and we all are real. For those of you who are just listening in, you're very welcome too. But for everybody, I would urge you to make use of the chat. We have a chat function and you can say good afternoon. That's great. Some people already have. It'd be really nice if you wrote in there where you're from. Is it a large organization? Is it a small organization? Are you working from home today? Are you in the office? Do feel free to share thoughts and ideas in the chat and ask questions in the chat throughout as well. It's one of the things that I really like about working over Zoom, working over Teams and platforms like this, that, we can type away and share thoughts as we're speaking, as we're viewing things. So yeah, so we've got Lincolnshire Co-op. Hi, Lincolnshire Co-op, Lincolnshire County Council, working from home, working independently and at home. Yes, I'm working independently as well. I'm freelance. So hi to all the freelancers there, but hi to all the employed there as well. We've got Platform Housing, variety from Lincolnshire, England Golf. Hi to England Golf. What else have we got? There's a multi-academy trust being represented here as well. So yeah, a good variation in experience background, and hopefully what I'm going to go through with you will be relevant no matter where you're from and what you're from, whether you're at home or whether you're in the office today. I am going to just share my screen. These slides, by the way, that I'm going to share will be available afterwards. And so if you do want to have a look at them, refer to them, there's a lot of links that I'll be sharing, you'll be able to do so. So I want to start off, though, by asking you a few questions. And so I'm going to launch a poll. There's a variety of different questions here. This is an anonymous poll. And I invite you then to check in with that poll. One part of the poll is, which of these do you recognize? That's question one. Thinking about work in non-work time, feeling rushed, constantly on the go, ranging all the way down to poor quality sleep. That actually, in my list, I've included twice. So that must be really important. I must think that that's a really important one to focus upon. But we've also got questions about number of working days lost due to mental ill health in the UK. We've got what percentage of working days are lost due to stress, depression, anxiety. So what are your thoughts on that? The poll is there for you to be able to give your thoughts and comments. Obviously, which do you recognize? You may recognize it in yourself, but you may recognize it in others as well. We've got tiredness being quite popular at the moment. Yeah, tiredness being very popular, but also not taking breaks being popular, I can see. Yeah, at the moment, not taking breaks. And tiredness being up there. Thinking about work in non-work time, I notice, is also pretty popular there. About half of us have voted now. And I'm assuming from the questions you will gather some of the things that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So some of these do relate to us personally. You know, how do you experience work, in work and out of work? Are there times when you notice that your sleep is not so good? But also, some of these relate to us working within organizations or with organizations. Some of these relate to general statistics. You know, what percentage of workers experience mental health problems in the workplace? What do we think? At the moment, 45% is the popular answer there. And what percentage of working days are lost due to stress, anxiety, and depression? We've got 38% being the most popular one. So about 3/4 of us have voted. So keep on thinking about that. And while you do, I would just invite you to have a think about this. As you can see, there's a speedometer. Hopefully you'll be able to see the speedometer there. And for those of you who have cars, and actually even if you don't have cars, I think you'll probably relate to this. But I'd like you to imagine a scenario. Imagine that you wake up in the morning and the first thing you do is rush out to your car. You rush straight out to your car. You get in the car, you turn the engine on, you put your foot down and you drive. It's the first thing you do, first thing in the morning. And you just keep driving, and you're driving as fast as you can possibly go. You've got your foot down. And so you're trying to steer clear of obstacles. You try not to hit anybody. You're racing along through your day. And you get to a point mid-morning and you notice that the fuel gauge is really low. And so you screech to a halt at a service station and you rush in to the shop. You grab a sandwich because actually you've noticed you're feeling a bit hungry. You fill up with fuel, you get back in the car and you put your foot down again and you just drive. And you keep going all the way through the day like this, only stopping when you absolutely have to fuel up. That's it. And you get to the end of the day and you turn the engine off and then you try to go to sleep. Maybe you get straight to sleep, maybe you don't. But the next morning, first thing in the morning, you do exactly the same again. You get into the car and you floor it. So all you do is you drive the car all day and you just fuel up when you have to. And imagine that you do that day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, the whole year. The question I ask you is, how long is your car going to last? I can see the odd smirk. So I'm assuming that actually some of you think that your car's not going to last that long. And would you treat your car like that? Would you use your car in such a way that you don't give it brakes, that you don't service it? But actually also, would you treat your body in that way, that all you're doing is you're driving your car all day and you just grab a sandwich while you're driving? You know, there are all sorts of questions we can ask ourselves about the attitude we might have to a car or what the impact of that would be. You see, but what's interesting is in a way, that is what we do every day. We wake up in the morning and we start thinking. And we're thinking ahead in our day. It's one thing, then it's another, then it's another, then it's another, and it just doesn't stop. And we just keep thinking. We keep thinking through our lunch breaks. We keep thinking when we're meeting with someone, when we're talking with someone. We're just thinking, thinking, thinking. We're running our minds in a way like we would never think of running our car. So I invite you just to think on that one and ponder that one. So what are we going to talk about today? What is the cost of mental ill health? We'll talk a little bit about that. I'm going to allude to that. What impacts our mental well-being? We've already started to kind of, step into that arena. What is good practice in promoting and supporting mental well-being? That's a great thing for us to share and to consider. And I hope that you will share your ideas for that as well within the chat as we go along. And I do want to share with you some of the sources of information. I mean, if we just went through all of them, it would be a very long set of slides, but some of the sources of information, some of those that are more theoretical and are more, evidence-based, research-based, or more influencing policy, and some of those that are incredibly practical that you can just take away with you and you can have a look at and implement no matter what size of organization you're in. I mean, the largest organization I've worked with recently, and I'm still working with at the moment, has about 4,500 staff. The smallest one that I've worked with over the last month has about 11. And actually, there are very similar principles and practices that we've been able to employ in both of those organizations. So I'll share a little bit of that. But I also want to ask you, and please do share in the chat about this one. I want to ask you, what's it been like living through the pandemic? You see, because we can talk about mental health and well-being, and we will do that, and we can talk about mental ill health in the workplace and the impact of that generally in relation to our general working practices, the modern working world. But over this past 12, 15 months, we've had this, huge other thing that we've been dealing with. And what's that been like? What challenges and difficulties have you experienced? What have you noticed? So I ask committee members, I ask guests here, share in the chat something of the challenges that either you've faced or that you have noticed others have faced over this past 12 months. What's it been like? There you go. So, Dean, bit isolating when only speaking to colleagues via a screen. Absolutely. One of the big changes that we've had to face over this past 12 months or so is this kind of stuff. I mean, all of the sessions that I used to do were all face-to-face. I would get, occasionally we would have a Zoom meeting or use the early versions of Teams and things like that. But ultimately, everything was face-to-face. I used to travel. I used to have water cooler moments where I would meet people in a corridor and bump into them. When was the last time you bumped into someone? What an odd turn of phrase that happens to be now. But also, yes, absolutely, changing roles. Loads of adaptation. Julie was mentioning this before we started, all the ways in which we've had to adapt over this last year. Juggling homeschooling has been a huge one for many. And also for many who have just been within a household where homeschooling has been part of that and they've not experienced that before, particularly when there have been bubbles that they've been forming with relatives, for example. Facing the anxieties, the anxiousness around COVID, absolutely. And around the changes as well, because it's not just the virus itself, but it's also all of the huge changes that we've had to experience, and particularly during lockdowns. But that's an interesting point as well. I've enjoyed it, but a number of colleagues have experienced loneliness. Many people have enjoyed it. And what's really interesting, looking at some of the surveys of mental health, for example, is there are many of those who are experiencing mental health problems and have had them exacerbated by the pandemic. But there are also those that have found actually the scarcity of people, the decrease in the number of interactions that they're having during the day, actually to be a real boost for their mental well-being. The number of people who have taken to walking in nature. Mental Health Awareness Week recently, promoted by the Mental Health Foundation, had a big theme of nature. And I think actually if they'd have had that theme 2 or 3 years ago, I'm not sure it would have been as popular. There was a way in which it's a little bit touchy-feely, it's a little bit soft, but actually we've really recognized the value of getting outside, of walking, of being in nature. I remember the first lockdown and hearing birdsong in a way that I'd never heard it within Lincoln before. I just hadn't noticed it. There was too much traffic. Probably the birds were scared off as well. So for some, quite scary, as has been said there by Sarah, worrying about, jobs, worrying, having those insecurities about income, where's it coming from? But also, yes, a need for a sense of purpose, absolutely. And what is it that's fueled our motivation? That's been a question that many have asked over this past 12 months. There's been many who have been starting new jobs. So as you can see, there is this huge number of impacts that COVID have had over and above anything that we would normally experience in the modern working world. And there's a few that I list here. You've listed many more. And as Terry said, appreciating that, starting the day with a walk, some of those positives as well as some of the negatives. But isolation and loneliness, exacerbation of mental health issues, bereavement has been a big one, and not just bereavement in relation to illness related to COVID, but the number of people who've been bereaved and not been able to attend funerals, for example, has been huge. What an impact that's had. So we recognize that there's all this stuff going on, all this has been going on. So let's answer some of the questions. In that poll, I'm going to end the poll now. I'm going to share the results with you. So I put this slide up to say existing costs of mental ill health. The reason I say that is because this was, these figures were put together before COVID. And what we actually find is that on average, each person suffering mental ill health took 21.6 days off due to stress, depression, and anxiety. So we had a kind of, most thought it was true, it was only 15, but actually it's 50% more than that, virtually. And 17.9 million working days were lost due to mental ill health. What do we have in the poll? Most thought that it was just 10.9, but again, almost a doubling of the number of days lost. When it came to percentage, actually, it's 51% of all work-related ill health cases. Now, you see, that's really interesting because over the last 30 years or so, the focus has really changed. It used to be that it was much more physical illness that we would measure and we would record, as you know. Those of you who work in HR will know this kind of thing. But actually, there's been such a move towards recognizing the impact of mental ill health. And actually, it's about 15% of people experiencing mental problems in the workplace. That said, though, one of the things we notice from the studies is that you'll find there's probably about 1 in 6 people who have something which is diagnosed at some point during the year and they're dealing with. But there's probably another 1 in 6 people who have equivalent symptoms, but they're just not seeking help and it's not diagnosed. And of course, we recognize the impact of this in staff sickness, absenteeism, presenteeism, something that hadn't been talked about until the last few years at all. People turning up to work actually when they are not fit and capable of doing the work because they're just too ill. But actually, how prevalent is that? And how many working practices promote that? How many cultures just adopt that as part of what you do? And of course, we get then the variable performance, we get burnout, and we get high staff turnover, to name a few of the issues that we face. And I kind of refer back then to, which of these do you recognize was the question? Thinking about work in non-work time, feeling rushed constantly on the go, tiredness during the day, feeling irritable. Not so many feeling so irritable or worried, but actually plenty feeling tired, plenty thinking about work in non-work time, and plenty not taking breaks or working through lunch. Remember what I was saying about getting in your car, starting it, driving it all day. When we're sitting there and we're thinking about work and working on work all the way through lunch, what impact does that have upon us? I'll mention something about that in a minute. So we can think about the kind of factors that do affect then poor mental well-being. And I use the term mental well-being and mental health sometimes quite interchangeably, but it's worthwhile noting that the dialogue around mental health is changing. It used to be the case that when you use the term mental health, you actually meant mental ill health. If you said, oh, I need to have a mental health conversation with a colleague, you meant that they had some kind of diagnosis and you had to deal with that. And that's not the case now. We recognise that actually there's a continuum. And so if you do any kind of mental health awareness training, my colleague Sam Kendall was going to be along today, but unfortunately she's doing something even more important. And so she couldn't join us today, but she runs some amazing mental health awareness training. And I know that if you needed to contact her and find out about her, then Julie would be able to give you some details on that. But the thing is, she talks all the time about the mental health continuum, the mental well-being continuum. We all actually have mental health in the sense that we all can be mentally well, or actually we can find that we're not so well. We can have symptoms of mentally poor health, low mental well-being, whether or not we've got a diagnosis of a mental illness. And many of us will find that actually we go for a long time really struggling without any kind of support and without any kind of help. So considering the kind of factors that contribute to that can be really beneficial for any organisation, irrespective of size. And that's why I put some of these psychosocial business culture. I mean, that term really comes from a World Health Organization report from 2010. This is 11 years ago now. And it was talking about the cultural impact upon well-being in the workplace. The kind of things that are your unwritten ground rules, the kind of grudges, the avoidance behaviors, the lack of vision that we often find, the procrastination that just becomes part and parcel of working life. The hazy boundaries, that's a key one. The toxic atmospheres that are all usually fueled by poor communication. So this report was talking about recognizing that if you want to do something about mental wellness and improve mental wellness, there's so much we can do culturally and organizationally within organizations to enable us to boost that mental well-being and move us up the continuum. But likewise, there are personal health resources. There's a role that individuals have as well. It's a partnership between an individual and an organization. And it's just things like looking after your diet, eating well. I was talking to, I don't know if you come across them, but the, what are they called? The gut people, it's the twins. They're on Instagram. They're all over Instagram at the moment, but it's these twins that were part of a study at a London teaching hospital. And they found that they were 100% genetically identical, but only 30% identical in terms of their gut health. And they were going, why is that? How is that? And they got really into it, and they started a business, and they've got a whole brand. And they were talking to me because I'm supporting a university that are developing a wellbeing strategy, and will this be part of it? And they were really enthusiastic about all of this. But one of the things they do is they produce evidence-based guidance, really straightforward, easy to use guidance on just finding out about what makes a difference in terms of eating, whether it helps or hinders you, whether it's good for you or not. What are simple changes you can make? So it's really good to see that kind of things out there. And personal health resources it's not only about what we eat and what we drink, but it is also about control, the perceived control that we have, the involvement we have, the ownership we have in our day-to-day work. And our ability to manage stress is a key one as well. So even though that's a personal health resource, there are ways that organizations are recognizing they can support their employees to manage stress more effectively, but that it is a responsibility of the individual to do that, because only I can manage my own stress. I can't get someone else to do that for me, but I can be supported, as I'll go on to point out. It might be worthwhile just flagging up a couple of questions around well-being, because these often come up, I notice. What is well-being? We can ask that question. There are lots of definitions out there. And if you go to the Oxford English Dictionary, you get the state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy. You go, well, what does that mean? But we can ask, what is a healthy workplace? In your workplace, or if you're working freelance and you're working with an organization, how do you recognize health in that organization? Because actually, we can view organizations as organisms, and we can consider, is it a healthy one? Does it seem healthy? We as humans recognize health. We really do, very intuitively. So what is a happy workplace? How do you know when it's happy? And it doesn't mean we're all sitting around singing Kumbaya. It actually means all sorts of things to different people. What do we mean by comfortable? What's comfortable for one might not be comfortable for another, but what actually does it mean that makes a difference to the work that we're doing? And when you look at the World Health Organization that's been proposing this particular definition of well-being for some time now, this complete state of physical, mental and social well-being, what's important here is that they're recognizing there are physical elements to well-being, mental elements to well-being and social elements to well-being. How many of us during the COVID pandemic have missed those water cooler moments? I certainly have. I've missed those informal just get-togethers with colleagues. It's been really odd, the etiquette of being on Teams. I can see about 4 people at the moment. So I know that Faye and Julie and Terry and Samantha and Dean are all there. And I can see you nodding every now and then, so I can see you're awake. That's brilliant. Sounds like you're actually even listening to me. But the rest of you, I don't know. It's really hard to navigate this social sphere that we're now in. And what does that do to our stress levels? Fortunately, I'm quite practiced, so don't worry about me. I'm all right with it. But actually, how difficult is it to keep doing this day in, day out? So recognizing this more holistic way of viewing well-being has been really helpful over the past 10 years or so. And there are many things we can do as individuals, as businesses, to support that more holistic view. And most importantly, how do we recognize wellness is a question I always take away. Because if we're not even looking for it, how can we do something better? Now, I think it's worthwhile at this point just making a comment. Oh, thanks, Kate, for reckoning. You are listening. Brilliant. Very reassuring. To say something about survival instincts. Because ultimately, one of the things that I do, I was asked the other day, what is it that you do, John? And I went, well, I could say I'm a wellbeing consultant because that's usually what I do say. But actually, consultant, what does that mean? We're always using these terms, aren't we? I'm freelance. Yeah, okay. I'm a therapist. Yeah, I teach mindfulness. There's all sorts of stuff that I do. But ultimately, one of the things I'm really passionate about is communicating about wellbeing. And when it comes to communicating about wellbeing, it's got to get to be simple, because it's got to get to that stuff that is the same for all of us, that is universal, irrespective of the situation we find ourselves in. So I come down to survival instincts for that. Our evolutionary history. We talked about physical well-being. Well, we are physical beings. And actually, if you look at the evolution, there's a fantastic book that looks at this, Sapiens, by Yuval Noah Harari. I recommend that to absolutely anybody if you want to have your head blown and your eyes opened to what really influences us as people. There is this huge evolutionary history that we have influencing us day in, day out. And actually, we've spent something like 99% of our modern human history in very small groups. It's only the last 1 to 5% at the most where we've actually been living in towns and cities. We've grown crops and stuff like that. We've been hunter-gatherers for most of it. So our biology is really hardwired to deal with hunter-gatherer issues. And what are those? Those are detecting safety and detecting threat. So whether you are working in a small business, in a large business, whether you're a CEO, whether you're a cleaner, no matter what level you work on, you are hardwired to look for safety and to look for threat. And we respond to it. We respond to it physically and emotionally. And we have all sorts of psychological strategies that are built upon that. And this is the thing. If we think about our psychological strategies that make a difference in a business, these are 3. And I take this model from something called compassion-focused therapy, which is a great model for considering what makes people tick. We have 3 basic drives within us, it's suggested. One is that we have a threat detector system. That's the fight or flight. That's the adrenaline, the cortisol. That's the thing that powers us through the day. And it's really valuable. I'm utilizing it now so that I can stay focused, that I can, be energized. It's a really important part of our everyday. It fuels that car if you're driving it all day. It fuels it. We also have a drive. We need, as Julian said, we need things to be motivated by. We need values. We need that, that drive to acquire. These things are really important. It helps us to thrive. But we also need nurture. The oxytocin, the joy, the pleasure hormones. And we need a balance in these for us to stay well. And I use the image that I've used in the presentation because actually threat has been huge over the past, year, but actually threat has been huge over the past few decades. Threat's been huge over the past few centuries, and it's a growing thing. The rate of change for us socially is a huge threat to us as individuals, and it really emphasizes that part of our biology. So we need to focus attention on the nurturing parts, on the drive parts. How do we motivate people? How do we enable people to feel supported? But also, how do we enable people to look after themselves and detect those threats and respond to them? So we've all got these survival instincts, and any method, any way that we work on well-being has to address these. Otherwise, we're not really getting to what makes us human. A little bit about resilience. Resilience is talked about a lot at the moment. And there's one piece of research that came out of some of the researchers at Nottingham Trent University and around mental fortitude training. But I think it relates brilliantly to businesses. That basically, what we want to create is a facilitative environment for any employee that we have. And what that means is we need to balance challenge and support. When the challenge goes up, the support needs to go up. When the challenge goes down, the support can go down. Otherwise, if you have too much support, you end up in just a comfortable environment, too comfortable. If you don't have enough support, you're in a stagnant environment. If there's no challenge and no support, yeah, it's just so stagnant, there's nothing to do. If you're in a high challenge and lack of support, you're in an unrelenting environment. That's when you get into burnout and overload. So in a way, the place that you want to be is high challenge and high support. High challenge and responsiveness, flexibility. These are the things that resilience research really tells us. And that's why resilience is being talked about so much, I think. It's a really good marker for us to consider how we approach things collectively and also individually. So what does a psychologically resilient workplace look like? Well, this is what the research tells us. It's safe, secure, and supportive. You've got to work on your nurture circuit. You've got to make sure that people do feel safe and secure. There's a clear leadership. And asking those questions about where are we going? Who are the flag bearers? Who are the ones that stand at the front and say, this is the direction? Good communication is absolutely key within a resilient workplace. Absolutely key. Good appraisal systems, giving that feedback, enabling people to know when they're doing a good job, but also enabling people to know when they're not doing the job that's needed. Demonstrating value is, that's part of the appraisal system, but it can go so much more. Celebration is an enormous part of it, but also the value in the work that's being done. What's the end point? Why am I doing this? If the value is recognized by someone, then that is such a huge motivator. Emotional literacy. You hear a lot about emotional intelligence. I prefer the term emotional fitness because it gives us a sense that actually we can work on this, we can develop this. And so developing our emotional literacy is part of developing emotional fitness, understanding what we mean by emotions, how we're experiencing them ourselves, how we recognize them in ourselves and others. The development of empathy is just growing all the time. And for those of you who have coaching skills and work in those environments, you'll know the enormous value of that. And responsiveness, that's a key thing. But not only responsive to the individual, but also to the organization. As I say, we can treat the organization as an individual, as an organism. And actually both are important. Because without, if your business withers, then the individuals don't have a job. They don't have valuable things to do. There's got to be a balance struck between those. Very practical ways of us recognizing this are these. Number one, recognizing that there is a physical and emotional and a mental element to well-being and well-being programs and interventions. I put that little image up there of when you get into a plane, this is a common metaphor that's going around at the moment, and I think it should be going around a lot. You get into a plane and you give them the safety talk, and they say, put the oxygen on yourself first before you put it on someone you're responsible for. Because otherwise you'll probably lose consciousness and you'll be no use to either of you. And they'll be fine for a few seconds if they lose consciousness. So you are okay, and then you can help them. And this is a key message when it comes to resilience, when it comes to self-care, when it comes to workplace well-being. Yeah, Natasha, I like that. I love this metaphor. It's great. It is a key message that actually look after yourself first, then you can do the really good job. If you're not doing that as a manager, as a leader, or as just a worker, how can you do the job that you're supposed to do? How can you care for those that are important to you? So this is also when I go into establishments that have a high care role, in their remit. This is one of the first things that we talk about. If you want to help people, help yourself first. Then you'll be great at helping people. But there are all sorts of ways that we can do it. We can do it as an organisation. We can work on health promotion. We can share ideas, conversations about what wellness is, and encouraging regular breaks. We know, and the research tells us, we are much more productive when we've had a break. Honestly, I can point you in the direction of loads of it that says that, and it is the case. Even though there's often a little voice in our head that says, "No, I've got to keep going until I finish. I've got it done." No, take a break. You'll be much more effective. Really, you will. Work-life balance is crucial as well, enabling there to be a social element to what we're doing. That's been really robbed from us in this virtual world. Maintaining social connections with work colleagues as well is really important. Organizations are like organisms, are like families. And I don't mean you have to be best friends with your workmates, but just having some form of getting to know people, knowing something about them, bringing their whole self to work, or as much as they want to bring to work, is a really crucial way of fostering well-being. One way of doing it, wellness action plans. I've put a link in the slides for you. Wellness action plans, something that Mind as an organisation is promoting. They're a great format, structure, framework for just having well-being conversations within any size workplace at all. And of course, I'd always recommend developing a well-being strategy. We develop EDI strategies. We develop health and safety strategies. It's health, safety, and well-being now. Develop a well-being strategy. It's a great way of fostering the conversation and keeping the conversation going and keeping it alive. And I've also included there some ways that individuals can work on well-being as well. Mindfulness, the research backs that up no end. Stress management, thinking skills, these are things. This is the thing, if you get into your car in the morning and you drive your metaphorical car, your mind, if you're just thinking all day, work on your thinking skills. Enable yourself to think yourself into breaks, to give your mind a break at times. You will thank yourself for doing it. And again, shed loads of research backs it up. So there's a few references that I put with that. There's the Mental Health at Work report from the Royal Society of Psychiatrists. There's the Thriving at Work, which was the kind of seminal work on this. Thriving at Work is an amazing report from 2017, has got loads of great recommendations. It's informed time to change, which is something else to look out for. It's informed lots of what the Mental Health Foundation are doing and promoting, what Mind is doing and promoting. It's a really good report. It's quite extensive, but actually, if you look at what Mind say about it, and more importantly, look at what the Mental Health Foundation say about it, they break it down really well. And there is the link there for wellness action plans. If you go to the Mind website, you just have to register with them, and it doesn't cost anything. They will send you through a guide for line managers, but they'll also send you through a guide for employees. And so you can see how a line manager might approach a wellness action plan and how an employee might do that as well. And there's a few other references I've put there: Headspace, Calm, Mind, a few books that I think are good, some tips for working from home that are really good, and some crucial underpinning wellness ideas of eat well, sleep well, get moving, and of course drink in moderation. We know this stuff, but it's great to get reminders of that. So where are we at now? We've got a few minutes. I said we'd have a few minutes for questions if you have any. So I ask you this: what's your takeaway from today? It's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour through well-being and mental health, and what works, what doesn't work. Oh, what am I doing? What are my friends doing? What's it been like? Thank you, Kate. Yeah, you've put up there the Thriving at Work reports link. That's really good. So what are you taking away from today? Is there something that you could just share with us to say, actually, oh, that occurred to me, or hey, we're doing that already? It's great to hear that. Or, oh, that's made me think. Yeah, there you go, Terry. You can recommend the Mindfulness and Resilience Facts books. Well worth a read. Absolutely. Finding Peace in a Frantic World has taken the world by storm. It is going around. It's great because there are guidance CDs in there as well, which are really good. Yeah, the idea of giving your mind a break. Yeah, go for a walk and not think about work. Wellness action plans. Yeah, absolutely. They're really straightforward, I tell you. Really good ones. So yeah, what are you taking away? And have you got any questions? I've got about 3 or 4 minutes, and I'm very happy to take any questions that you have about today. Yeah, Kat, you're saying not running on full throttle for too long. Absolutely, because we're much more complex than cars. We need all sorts of input. But even a car couldn't do it. Do you know, I used to run my cars like that, I have to say. Years ago, I used to work for a charity, and I was an operational manager in a charity, and we had one of those things. I once did a part-time job with them. It was supposed to be 3 days a week, but I was on non-contracted hours. So I was just working all the time. And I remember sitting in a meeting with someone from social services, and the two of us did that kind of my stick's bigger than yours, where he was going, well, I worked 75 hours last week. And I said, well, I worked 78. And there was something, you know, it was a bit of camaraderie between us. And I was, you know, I got home and thought, what am I talking about? What am I doing? I've got a 9-month-old. Why am I doing this? And that changed my thinking quite a lot. So yeah, we've got Adam, you saying, if you don't look after yourself, how can you possibly look after anybody else? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, how many of the psychosocial business culture elements are challenges? Yes, and they are. But there are things you can do about those. And that's why a wellbeing strategy is crucial, particularly for large organizations. You need something to help drive the change through and keep it going and keep the momentum going. And you need, this is the crucial thing, senior leadership buy-in if you're in a large organization. You haven't got that, you can't do it. I'll be sharing these slides. Actually, I'll see if I can share them in the chat now. If I can't, then I'll pass them to Julie. Julie, is there a way that you would be able to share the slides with people who've been along today?
Yes, certainly. We have a platform for a lot of our learning resources, so presentations and so on, and we usually include a link in the newsletter. And also, if you reply to the response survey, feedback survey, when you get to the end, you get automatic access to the slides as well. So different methods. But yes, I've got a copy of John's slides, so we'll share them in the usual way.
And I see that there's a few more suggestions there of what people are taking away. Yeah, not getting caught up in everything because it is easy to do that. Being kind to yourself, yeah, definitely. And a question there from Adam, any tips for SMEs who don't have the resource or expertise to implement wellbeing strategy? One thing I'd say is just maybe revisit that, because actually you probably got more expertise than you think. Wellbeing strategy, you know, you can write it on the back of a napkin, actually. It doesn't have to be very complicated. That said, if you look to the Mind website and the Mental Health Foundation, both of those link to ideas around wellbeing strategies. The World Health Organization report also links to some really good ideas about it. Googling it is good. I mean, I do that all the time, and I freely give away ideas and I freely nick ideas as well. And there are lots of ideas out there. But one of the things is, if you can, access some business coaching and make that your focus. Find a business coach that is going to work on a wellbeing strategy with you, because then you'd be surprised at what you can achieve and what you can do in a very short space of time. There you go, Action for Happiness, absolutely, Kate, yeah. And they produce those really good calendars as well that can be quite inspirational, that you can share things, share ideas. But if you do have any other questions, Adam, feel free to email me. I know that my details will be shared, so yeah, do come back with any questions afterwards. Yeah, Joyful June, Action for Happiness, absolutely, really good. So I hope that there has been a way that this has given you some food for thought, some things that, you know, might give you a sense of just maybe one small change you might make, or one question you might ask, or one thing you might try and do, even if it is to prompt you to have a conversation with someone about wellness, about well-being, about the importance of it, to pass on any of the links, the ideas, etc. Yeah, hopefully we can keep making our working lives better for all of us if we keep these kind of conversations going. So thank you again to CIPD for inviting me along to talk about this. It's, you know, it's such a crucial topic, and I'm really glad that you've put it on your agenda in this way. So I really do appreciate that. If there are any other questions, email them through. Otherwise, I wish you a really good day. I'm going to stop sharing now.
Okay, thank you very much, John. That was really interesting and informative, and with lots of energy as well, which is so you'll need to give yourself a bit of a break now and stop your thinking, get your stress levels down. But thank you very much indeed. It was great. I think we've all taken something away from that, and giving your mind a break, I think, is the one that I will take away, because I do the good thing and go for a walk, but then I end up thinking about work. So I haven't quite done the full package. So that's been my takeaway, certainly. So thank you so much. We really appreciate it. And the access to all those useful resources is a really good resource for us all to take away. So thanks ever so much for your time, John. We really do appreciate it. And we'd love to see you again another time.
Yeah, goodbye, everyone.
Have
a great AGM. Hopefully see you again soon.
All right. Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.